Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode number 11 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Vendor series. And today we're going to be talking about craft fair booth etiquette for vendors. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first element that we're going to talk about is respecting your neighbor's space, and you should never exceed your booth boundaries that are set by the event organizer. You never want to encroach on your vendor's space or anything like that, and there's reasons why the organizer has set these booth boundaries. They have to make sure that the event has a certain flow to it. They have to make sure that the aisles are a certain width, and there's just a lot of elements at play here, and this is one of the more basic things that you should be doing to make sure that your etiquette is good at a craft fair. So just always stay within those booth boundaries. Okay, another thing we should talk about as far as your neighbors is if you happen to, bump one of their displays or something like that and you break one of their items, just pay for it. Don't even make it an optional thing. Don't ask if you should pay for it. Just pay for it. It's, accidents happen, so that's okay. These things, sometimes happen, but, never leave it up to them to make the decision on, whether you should pay for it. Just do the right thing and, pay for the item that you've broken. All right. And then also a lot of vendors will bring Bluetooth speakers to events these days, but you should never be playing your music loud at your booth. It's one thing to have it very low to help set an atmosphere or a vibe at your booth, but you should never have it turned up to the point where it's affecting other booths or, other booths can even hear it because it might not be their thing. It might affect their experience at the show. So this is something that you should consider either not having at your booth at all, which I kind of recommend. But if you do have some kind of music playing, keep it very, very low so that it's only in your booth. Okay, now for another tip, you should always sell what you told the organizer you'd be selling at your booth. It's okay to have some items. Maybe you have a new item in your line of products, but it still falls within your theme. So that's okay. But basically, you never want to have something entirely different than what you told the organizer you'd be selling when you registered for this event. There's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, it's going to get you on the organizer's bad side because of misrepresentation of your booth. But secondly, and more importantly, the event organizer, they're making a booth layout and they're assigning booths to vendors based on what they were told you'd be bringing. Okay, so this can lead to a lot of conflicts. So say you are a jewelry vendor, but all of a sudden you start bringing metalworks or something completely unrelated. They're potentially going to assign you next to somebody who could be bringing that item. Okay, so this can complicate the booth layout, and it can sometimes lead to vendors being assigned next to one another unintentionally, okay, because the organizer just doesn't know that you're bringing something entirely different. So keep that in mind. There's reasons why the organizer wants to know what you're selling ahead of time, and a lot of times it has to do with how they're assigning the booths so that they have everybody spread apart in a reasonable manner. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to talk about is being punctual for the event. So you want to factor in your load in and your load out time. You need to have your booth set up when the organizer has requested that booths are set up by, because sometimes this is actually even before the event opens to the public, because the organizer wants to walk around and take videos or a picture and then do one last social media share to spread the word for the event. So just be sure that you have those times in mind as well. On the flip side, at the end of the show, you should never ever deconstruct your booth early. I don't care if the show is a dud or it's slow or something went wrong. You should never deconstruct your booth early. A lot of reasons behind this. For one thing, if there are shoppers walking through the show, it basically tells them that the event is wrapping up and they should get out. So this just completely throws off the vibe of the event. Like I said, even if you're having a bad day, you got to stick it out. You got to stick it out and wait till the end until it's time to deconstruct the booth per the organizer's instructions. And then also, if you're chatting with your neighbor, sometimes you talk to your neighboring vendors and things like that. But if a shopper either comes to your booth or their booth, you should, put that conversation on hold so that either one of you has that opportunity to interact with the shoppers, because at the end of the day, that's what you're there for, primarily, instead of, building those connections with the vendors. So just be mindful of when the shoppers are around, and, cut those conversations short and resume when there's another lull in the show. All right, and my next tip for etiquette is to never make a scene. Okay, so if you're in a situation where maybe there's some tension arising with a shopper or a fellow vendor, this is something that you should either try to resolve in a calm and professional manner, or if you can't do it that way, then it's time to contact the organizer to see if you can resolve it that way. On the flip side, if you have an issue with the event organizer and you can't resolve it in a calm or professional manner, then that's the opportunity that you're going to have to take to follow up with them after the event, okay? Because you just don't want to put a damper on the event. A lot of times these situations are kind of like one person and another person, or maybe not a lot of people involved. But if it starts getting really dramatic and loud and intense, then a lot of people are involved who didn't want to be, so you always just want to try to maintain the integrity of the show and keep the, positive vibes and good vibes of the show intact. So if you can't resolve it in a calm and professional manner, just wait till after the event. All right, so there's also a little bit of an unwritten rule that we should talk about that, some vendors might not know about. So you always want to resist the urge to lower your prices at your booth at an event, okay? So slashing prices during an event, it can be tempting, like say if there's not a lot of traffic and you just want to get some items moving, but it can get you on the bad side of fellow vendors. It's a tactic that might pay off in the very, very short term by, maybe moving a couple of extra items that you wouldn't have, but it might also hurt you in the long term by damaging relationships with fellow vendors at that event. It makes other vendors feel like they've been undercut and that their standard prices that they came to the show with are now obsolete and no longer good enough. Okay, so this is just something that, again, not all vendors might be aware that this is kind of like a bad thing, or, why this is a bad thing. But I wanted to mention it in this video because it is something that a lot of like veteran vendors will take offense to. So even if you're having kind of like a rough show, or maybe there's not like that great of a crowd, just stick it out, resist the urge and the temptation to lower those prices just for the sake of moving a couple extra items during that single show. All right, so now another element of etiquette that you want to keep in mind is you never, ever should be stealing or poaching customers from other vendors' booths. This is one of the biggest sins that a vendor can make at an event, and it's definitely going to make you a bad vendor in the eyes of other vendors. And this is actually something that vendors will easily get kicked out of or banned from future events from organizers as well. So it's a very, very serious thing, and you should never be doing this under any circumstances. And basically what it boils down to is if you are at an event and you're seeing that customers are kind of passing your booth by to shop from other booths, well, then you need to look inwards instead of trying to steal outwards from other vendors. You should be looking at your products, the quality of them, what you have them priced at, how you're displaying them, and then you yourself, how you're interacting with customers or not interacting with them. You should always be looking inwards to see what you could be doing better at your booth instead of worrying about, taking other opportunities away from vendors who are doing things correctly. Okay, so not to sound harsh during this part of this video, but this is one of the worst things that a vendor can do at a craft fair. And it's probably going to basically blacklist them from other shows in their area, because word will get around about this very, very quickly. So no matter what, never ever steal shoppers from other vendors. Okay, so now let's talk about an opportunity where you can, become a good vendor in the eyes of the organizer. And there's a few different things that you can do, like etiquette wise, that will help you get on the good side of organizers and maybe start to generate some good karma for yourself with getting into, higher profile events and things like that, because word is getting around that you're a good vendor. So the first thing that you can do is to be as low maintenance or self-sufficient as possible. So what you want to do is, especially when you're registering for an event, you want to research it as much as you possibly can. Okay. So all the details leading up to the event, you want to be in the loop on those. If the organizer is sending out emails with information, be sure to read the entire thing and make sure that you understand the entire thing. Okay. So that you're not putting yourself into a situation where you're asking questions that have already been answered by the organizer. So this can kind of be one of those, it's not going to get you like banned from an event by any means, but like if an organizer sees that a vendor is asking a whole bunch of questions that you've already sent information out on, it just kind of gets like a little bit irritating as an organizer. You know what I mean? So just, be proactive and take those steps to make sure that you're, fully engaged with the information that's going out and fully engaged with the event itself. And that you're, again, being proactive to be a vendor who has all the information and they're only asking questions that haven't already been answered. All right. So another thing that you can do to, kind of get yourself on the good side of the organizer is to help advertise the event. So spread the word about the event on all your social media platforms. That's something that every vendor should be doing. And then consider asking the organizer if there's other ways that you can kind of get involved. Sometimes, like just as an example, the organizer has a bunch of signs that like yard signs. And, you could maybe volunteer like your front yard for a couple weeks before the show to, have the organizer, come by and stick the sign in your grass. And then that way, it's kind of helping to spread the word in a different manner other than social media stuff. So basically, if every vendor was doing these things, I guarantee you that the event would have a much, much greater attendance than just the organizer doing their marketing methods. So, help yourself, basically. This is basically just you helping yourself. So if every vendor is kind of pitching in, there's going to be a bigger crowd at the show, and it's going to lead to more opportunities for sales and connections with shoppers at the event. Okay, now getting back to the booth at the show, one thing that you should definitely be doing is keeping your booth tidy. Okay, so stow away all of your bins and your boxes and your bags and all of your clutter. It should be underneath your tables, and this is a good thing to do underneath those tablecloths is to have all of that set up as storage. So you always want your booth to be easily accessible, tidy, and you want the focus to be on your items and not, the things laying around. And also, just for a matter of safety, you want there to be, no tripping hazards or anything like that at your booth where people can maybe trip and fall or, get injured in some way. So just keep that in mind as well. This is another thing on etiquette that's very easy to do, but sometimes it's easy to forget as well. So have everything tucked away, have it looking nice and clean and tidy. Okay, so now this next element, as a former event organizer, I can tell you firsthand that not everybody does this, but those who do, it's very much appreciated. So at an event, when you're participating as a vendor, you should always clean up after yourself, okay? You want to leave the booth in the same condition with which you found it in the morning, okay? So you don't want to leave, food wrappers or messes, or maybe you had to unload some inventory that was in bags, and you don't want to leave that stuff behind, okay? The organizer at the end of the show typically has to go around and clean everything up, and then sometimes that falls on a facility staff at the venue that the show is at, and sometimes those fees will trickle down back to the organizer as like a cleanup fee. So do the organizer a favor, leave it in the condition that you found it. And again, this is another way to just kind of have good etiquette at the show to show the organizer that you're a responsible vendor and that you're considerate to other people in other situations outside of just you and your booth. Okay, well, I hope that you all enjoyed this video. There was a lot of different tips in here, but I'm sure that there's a whole bunch more, okay? So etiquette is something that we all kind of stumble upon and just learn as we go. So if you have other suggestions, definitely drop them into the comments and we can kind of talk about them and learn more from them. So I always welcome those comments, and I appreciate that you guys take the time to do that. Again, this was episode number 11 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Vendor series. And if you want to check out all the other videos in the playlist, check out this playlist above. And thank you all so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel.